If I've learned one thing in 8 years of running a craft beer channel, is that some people have some very weird views about beer.
Yeah, mate. I mean, like, get some really left field stuff.
Yeah, some real like head scratches. Where you're like, what?
What we need to do now is bring it back to the basics, Johnny.
Absolutely. So that's why in this video we're going to be giving you the 5 things you need to understand about craft beer to stop the spread of craft misinformation. So the one thing I really want to get across in this video, and it's kind of the biggest bugbear I have about the craft beer scene, and that is that craft does not mean good.
No.
In fact, I would go as far as to say that more craft beer is crap than craft beer is good.
Whoa.
I know, that's controversial coming from me, a mad lover of great beer and of craft beer, but that people see it as a barometer of what is good and what isn't.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, most craft beer is about experimentation.
Yeah, I think it's a meter of artistic expression, and you know, not all artists are as talented as other artists.
And even great artists sometimes do something a bit shit.
And that's okay. And that's the great thing about, you know, free choice and experimentation.
Yeah.
You don't always get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's fun.
It's fun, and it's also, you know, that's how we learn.
Yeah.
By experimenting and things going wrong and things going right and repeating the stuff that goes right. So, you know, we should never excuse bad beer. We should always go back to the brewer or the pub or whatever it is and say this beer was not good, because they need that feedback. But we shouldn't be buying beer because we think it's going to be better because it's got craft credentials, whether that's process, ingredients, ethics, whatever it is. You know, all those things actually make it harder to make good beer. But what we do need to do is remember that and say, you know, I see so many newbies, new beer lovers who just assume that the way that beer tastes is how it's supposed to be. So they're forgiving diacetyl, acetaldehyde, isomyl acetate when it shouldn't be there, with, you know, butter, green apple, or foam banana flavours, or really dusty hops or oxidation. And they're like, you know, this is great, I'm drinking craft. And you're like, but you're not drinking great craft.
Yes.
And that's what I want people to know, you know, be critical of every craft beer that you have, and feed back to people, because craft doesn't mean good, but it would be really nice if it did. So on a related topic, another thing that really bugs me is when we do criticise beer, often we blame the brewer. And I think it's a symptom of like review sites where, you know, if we have a bad pint and we give it 2 stars on Untapped or a low score on Rate Beer or whatever it is, or tell our friends it sucks, what we're not actually realising is that that beer as a whole might not be bad.
Yeah.
Right? That beer might have been great at the brewery, might have been great when it was sent out, and something's gone wrong in transport. Most of the time when you have a bad beer, it's gone wrong since it's left the brewery.
So once it's left their hands and it's on a truck, on a boat, hopefully on an air-cooled vessel, it's out of their control. Like
Exactly.
they don't know if it's going to get under the immense heat of a sun.
Exactly. It's like anybody who's ever muled some cans, like gone on holiday, bought some special beer to bring back. Think of the fear when you're on that airplane on the way home and you're thinking, I hope my beers make it, I hope my beers make it, I hope my beers make it. Every brewer in the world experiences that feeling. Yeah, multiply that by all the beer made on Earth.
Yeah.
And that is the lottery that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So yes, like we said earlier, there is some bad craft beer, stuff that shouldn't have left the brewery. That's a truth. But there's this other section of bad craft beer, which is purely down to bad logistics, not cold storage, not being fresh, not being treated with the respect that it needs, like in the cold store, or the pipes that go to the tap that has influenced these flavours in a negative way. So what I want people to understand is that when you have a bad pint, it's not always the brewer's fault, and as a result you need to know the difference between those two before you give it a bad rating.
Yeah, don't always jump to the worst possible assumption in that the brewery sucks or the brewer doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Here's a big one, and I know that this is going to upset some people. Fresh is best, but we can't fetishize it.
No.
I see so much in comments and Facebook groups and Reddit groups, people refusing to drink IPAs because they're more than 2 weeks old. Now that is mental, right? First thing, if a brewer can't make a beer that can last 2 weeks, then they're not a good brewer.
Yeah.
But secondly, even a bad brewer, most of those beers are going to taste great at 3 weeks. In fact, and here's the thing that might upset people, I would argue that most New England IPAs, where the freshness fear is real, probably taste at their best 4 to 6 weeks out of the brewery.
Right.
So long as they're looked after right.
Because they've mellowed a little bit.
Exactly.
Right.
Brewers increasingly are hopping later and later and later. And that means often, as we found out when we brewed our New England IPA with Verdant's recipe, the hops go in, they sit there for 48 hours at a cold temperature, and then it's canned, right? Now, firstly, you get a thing called can shock or bottle shock, which isn't entirely understood. There's not been much research into it, but basically, flavours can get really muted, or really nasty flavours can come out, and then they go back in. And that can last a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And on top of that, you've got really green, actual hop matter. That's a little bit of that is left over in suspension, and that needs time to mellow. And that's why when you get a really fresh beer, sometimes it's oniony, it's garlicky, it's dank, weedy, whereas you're expecting an absolute juice bomb. And that's because you've drunk it too fresh. Too fresh, oniony, green, too old, marmalade-y, cardboardy.
Yeah.
In between the two is a sweet spot, and if it's kept cold, it's going to be between 2 and 6 weeks from can.
Yeah, so like you can prolong that life if you get maybe you get a hold of it quite soon and you treat it well, and it's going to be good for a while. Right?
And if you do treat it really well, you could have a New England IPA last 6 months if it's been cold stored the whole time at a constant temperature.
Yeah.
Okay, so fresh is best. At the brewery is best. Cold chain is actually more important than the packaging date, as far as I'm concerned. So we got so excited we didn't even crack our lovely Siren beer. So why don't you do that while I introduce number 4. 4 out of 5, Brad, and this is the only time you pour on camera and you forgot. Never mind.
I mean, I care a lot about this stuff, Johnny.
I can understand. You just don't care about me getting my wetting my whistle.
Oh dear.
Okay, point number 4.
Yep.
The hype is real. The FOMO is real. We get it. We understand why we all want to get hold of the stuff that everyone else says is amazing. And that's cool. Most of these hype beers are indeed great. Okay, but what we need to remember is that underneath all those hype breweries are a set of significantly more breweries that are just as good, and something went wrong in the marketing.
Yeah, a lot of times it is purely marketing, or it's just whatever's the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
For whatever particular reason, something has sparked the imagination and made people care passionately about something. Beyond passionately, almost, in a lot of occasions. Fanatically about things.
Absolutely. And we've definitely been guilty of that in the past as well. I think we're not removing ourselves from
No, of course not.
There's an amazing story that I heard, and I won't give all the details because it might upset specific people, but basically there is a festival in Europe that became seen as a place that breweries needed to go because there were so many rate beer raters there that if you went there with the good beer, you could guarantee you'd end up on the rate beer best list at the end of the year.
God damn.
So that is how, internet algorithms and hype feed into each other and distort each other. So there were lots of breweries that didn't go to that festival, that wouldn't get onto these lists, that wouldn't start generating that hype, but their beer was just as good, if not better, than the stuff that was at the festival. So we just have to remember that hype is a social construct. It is created by us, by this kind of mass hysteria. Whereas actually there are some fantastic breweries that do not get that. And a lot of what we've started trying to do now is to try and discover those breweries. And you'll be amazed by just branching out into breweries you haven't heard of, how high the quality has got. And particularly during lockdown last year, lots of people, I think, recognised that and started drinking from their local brewery and going, oh my God, I didn't know you guys were this good.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a new appreciation of what's local to you. Because we've had to get more hyper-local as we've been locked down.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's kind of broken people out of the hype machine somewhat. Because they haven't got any other options. Yeah. Mainly. Which, that's a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. Any kind of reset to that hype machine just creates a level playing field again for everybody.
Just to set it back, to normalise the playing field a little bit. can only be a good thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a demonstration of that for me would be, when was the last time somebody got really hyped about a lager, a Pilsner? It just doesn't really happen. Whereas some of the best beers in the world are Pilsners. So it's just worth bearing in mind and not buying into the hype. Follow that stuff, buy that stuff, try that stuff, but do not forget that there's much easier to get hold of stuff out there that will be equally as good, and we can support a broader range of businesses by doing so. The fifth thing that everybody needs to understand about craft beer is that beer is expensive to make.
Yes, this is, I think, oftentimes people think, it's only beer. Why does it cost this X amount of money?
Exactly.
Which is, that is really doing a disservice to all of the investment, all of the energy, all the resources that go into it, which are not cheap.
No. I mean, beer has kind of shot itself in the foot. It is the drink for the everyman. It can be incredibly cheap, it can be relatively quick to make, and it can be relatively easy to transport. And that's why Pilsner essentially came to rule the world, because it was all three of those things. What we need to remember is that, yes, macro beer is cheap to produce, barely takes a week, and is pretty rugged when it comes to logistics. It can be transported pretty brutally. However, the stuff that we're making now, once we even take aside the fact that if it's higher alcohol, it's probably going to be taxed higher in a lot of countries, the thing we need to remember is that the equipment that makes it is incredibly expensive. The ingredients that go into it, particularly the hops, are incredibly expensive, and then they need to be transported so carefully.
Yes.
And they're also bought in such small quantities. When you go into a bottle shop, you'll spend 40 quid and you'll walk away with 8 beers. When you go into Tesco's and buy a crappy 6-pack, you'll spend a fiver and walk away with more actual liquid volume. So you're selling less, so you're getting through it slower, and on top of that, it's costing you more. So beer is incredibly expensive to make.
Yeah.
And it's not, sadly, lots of beers are not for everybody. They are too expensive. No. And we need to treat them more like we treat wine. Nobody ever goes like, oh, that bottle of wine at 20 quid was a rip-off. But people will go, that pint at £4.50 was a rip-off. It's similar equipment. The processes are not that much quicker with certain styles. So they absolutely should cost proportionately more than the audience currently expects.
Yeah, I'm always surprised by how cheap lager is because of the time in tank. Obviously, less hops.
Less hops, but more time in tank is equally as expensive, and people kind of need to remember that. It's only because demand hasn't driven it up. Craft lager is not in huge demand. And I'm still guilty of it as well. Like, I'll spend 8 quid on an IPA, but if somebody tries to charge me 8 quid for a lager, I'd be like, even with everything I know, I'd be like, well, that's a bit much, isn't it?
Do you want to check that again, mate? You sure that's 8 quid? And there's also an economy of scales here, which it works against craft beer.
Yeah.
So the sort of more niche, the smaller the scale of your operation, the bigger your overheads, the less of a margin you may have. And, you have to put your prices up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're not trying to be snobbish here. Like, if you think that these beers aren't worth it, that's 100% cool. If they don't float your boat, that's great. Don't pay that much for them. There'll be lots of other beers that will be a little bit cheaper that you'll be very, very happy with. But I'm very nice in the comments generally, but I don't look kindly upon people who come onto like double IPA reviews, not that we do reviews, and say, 7 quid for a can, I could get X amount of macro lager for that. And you're like, yeah.
You could.
Cool, what's your point?
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that's put the record straight on a couple of cliches and bits of misinformation that are out there in the beer industry at the moment. If you've got any ideas of other stuff that you think that everybody needs to know, we're going to start collating some ideas, and we'll make a follow-up to this in a couple of months with 5 more things, 10 more things, 100 more things that we need to know. So put those in the comments, and if you want to talk to us directly about all of these things, the best thing you can do is join our Patreon, patreon.com/craftbeerchannel, in which you'll get access to our wonderful Discord forum full of beer geeks who are ready to non-judgmentally debate us all on such things. Yeah, so drink without judgment, and remember the 5 important things.